Well, I'm guessing that about 89% of the people in this room either know Helen Arnold personally or are familiar with her legacy throughout the corridor. We are so fortunate to have Helen join us today and celebrate the release of her first book that was just made available, like I mentioned, Volunteering for the Genius. I already mentioned that we will have Helen available. There is in your folder information about purchasing the book. There's a little bookmark, so feel free to take a look at that and ask Helen any questions about her book. For those of you less familiar with Helen, she is president of Arnold Olson Associates, a firm that provides fund development consulting services for nonprofit organizations. She's an associate consultant for Bristol Strategy Group, certified to deliver fundraising the smart way. Helen is also the nonprofit advisor for Clearly Compliant Incorporated, a company that provides third company state registration services for nonprofits. Helen has a 50-plus year history, both as a volunteer and a professional in the nonprofit world. As a volunteer, she has worked for numerous charities and has served on 62 nonprofit boards in the Chicago, New York, Eastern Iowa, and Las Vegas area. Today, Helen will show us how to figure out our personal needs and asking style and how to blend those into success with our future benefactors. Please welcome Helen Arnold.
Okay, can everybody hear me? I am condemned to carry this microphone so that they can get the audio. So normally I can just talk loud. All right, and I don't want to be technologically challenged here, so I will be walking back and forth. Welcome, I'm delighted you're here. This is really, really exciting, a really full room. Lots of new faces. I've been around a long time, so I've seen a lot of evolution. Today, you are going to hear 3 completely different presentations. Mine is all about you. And I know Jennifer gave you that descriptor, but as I was writing it, it evolved a little. So it's like that, but it's a little different. And mine is all based on a completely unscientific study I have been doing for a long, long, long time over a phenomena in this industry, and we'll go into that. My part is all about you as a professional, and you are the center of the universe in your organization when it comes to that as a nonprofit development professional, and it's more than fundraising, so I don't like that word. And then you have Kent, who is one of the most charming, funny human beings on the face of the earth, and one of the tallest. I should tell you, I'm familiar because my dad was 6'5", and he's 6'5", so I'm all okay with that. And he's going to talk to you about your donors, so that's a whole different area. And then Ellen is going to talk to you about how to really know what you're doing and not feel like you're shooting from the hip. Yes, folks, there really is a great way to identify and track your donors, and your board will be delighted. Okay. You as a development professional, this, in our industry, it has evolved. In 1970, there were, I reversed it. In 1960, there were 70,000 501c3s in the United States. Today, there are 1.5 million. That's not only a lot of demand for professional fundraisers or advancement people or whatever you want to call it, it's a huge demand on the donor dollar. Huge demand. Just out of curiosity, does everybody know about Giving USA and the report on all the giving in the United States? Okay, we're a very philanthropic country, the United States is. Does anyone know what the #1 philanthropic country in the world is? Per capita. Ready for this? Myanmar. The USA is second. Australia is third. New Zealand is fourth. How about that? Bet you didn't think about that. Interesting phenomena. But there are challenges in this industry that are anecdotal, and I've spent a lot of years being deeply involved with Association of Fundraising Professionals nationally and Grant Professionals Association nationally. So I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of professionals about the phenomena I'm about to talk about. That's my unscientific study. And so this is an interesting thing. This is the first time I've ever presented this to anybody. I've never seen it presented at any conference or anything, ever, in an awful lot of years of doing this. How many, let's just get a hand in here, how many of you, I want to find out where you are in your professional development. How many of you are in your salad days, young, energetic, a little green? Raise your hands. Cool. Okay. And how many of you are closer to me? 5 years, and you're thinking about retiring. All right. And the rest of you are in between. Hands on the in between. Okay. Terrific. So we have a wide array. Development or nonprofit fundraising, I guess, but development is not a job you pick lightly. This isn't McDonald's. It isn't incidental in your lives. It is intentional. You make a decision to do it. None of us, how many of us made our first million in this industry by the time we were 25? Okay. Well educated. You have to know what you're doing, not only about the world do you have to be informed, but about your craft. You have to be informed. You're here. You're constantly being educated and re-educated. If you have an opportunity, learn something. There's always something new. There's always a different way to hear something and think about something and use a skill set that maybe you haven't thought of. This industry has evolved. Again, in 1960, 90% of the development professionals were men. Today, 80% are women. Interesting. And the preponderance of men, oddly enough, and this is anecdotal, this is my non-scientific study, tend to be at hospitals and higher education. The grassroots, the smaller, tend to have women, smaller nonprofits. Also, you have to care. You have to be invested personally. You have to have fire in your belly, or this industry will crush you. Emotionally, it will. And you all know that, right? But the other part of it is you do so much good that nobody can pay you enough to have those feelings of, oh my gosh, what a difference. What a difference this has made to a student, to somebody in need, to that kid who needed a bicycle, whatever that looks like. Nobody can pay you enough to replace those feelings. Okay, I'm going to do at the beginning sort of a 30,000-foot view, global view of how we look at our industry. So this is really geared a little bit more to the younger folks in the room. I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of them. We're going to talk about the basics, what our habits are today, and how we need to look at them, again, from your point of view as a fundraising professional. The basics. Can we agree? Everybody on earth wants to make a difference with their lives. I don't care where you live or who you are or what you do. Nobody gets to the end of their life and says, I'm really glad nobody noticed I was here. So that's what we're working with. And it's 100% involvement. However that person is, or whatever that person is as a human being, that's there. It's our role to find their heart and their passion and fill it. We don't fill the needs of the organization, we fill the needs of the donor. Okay. This is how we're trained. This is older than me, this triangle. It is the development, the cultivation, solicitation, stewardship that you keep going around and around and around. We've all seen this, right? Who hasn't seen this before? Okay, so now you have. There you go. You're an old hand. Okay, I always add research because if you don't do your homework, why are you doing this? You need to be informed. You wouldn't go apply for a job without, I would hope you wouldn't, without doing a little bit of research about who you're going to be talking to and what the company does. You wouldn't just show up and say, oh, give me a job. I don't know what you do, but give me a job anyway. This is how we are trained as development professionals. Donor-centered fundraising. Penelope Burke. How many have her book? Okay, if you don't have it, get it. She is Canadian, by the way. Lovely lady. And it's true, and it was a big hurrah when this came out. When was it, Libby? In the 80s, the early 80s, she wrote this. And where have we been before that? It was just never pulled together in a phrase, donor-centered fundraising, before she did it. And it's all about the donor. And that's still true. That's never going to change. It's about their needs and what you're filling and building those relationships. Absolutely true. But that's not what we're talking about entirely today. Our habits, what do we do? It's funny because I've been around long enough that there was no real fundraising infrastructure in the, I go back to this, I guess the early 60s is when I first started doing this. It was outside of hospitals and colleges and universities. There was no real systematic approach to fundraising. It was very shoot from the hip, manna from heaven, God will provide, that kind of stuff. We've all heard that, right? Have we all sat in our offices and hoped that? Yeah, okay, we're going to talk about that and our focus. Okay, our customary infrastructure. And by the way, let me back up and say something. Daryl Upsall, who is a consultant, and he's a Brit, and he has offices in Spain, and he consults all over the globe. We are the country with the most philanthropic infrastructure on the face of the earth. Our systems are in place much more than in any other country. Doesn't mean other countries aren't caring, but we have that infrastructure. Oh, we have, and we all are trained, right, in annual campaigns, major gift, capital campaigns, endowment, planned giving, over and over and over again. One of the best planned giving vendors with policies and programs and projects is Stelter out of Des Moines. They're really, really good. Don't discount them because they're from Iowa. They're probably one of the best in the world. Research and analysis of donors. We're taught over and over and over again how to talk to our donors. And this is all important, and it's important, and you have to be there. But that's what we get educated on, and how to figure out the donors. Volunteer management. Now here I'm really talking about fundraising volunteers, trying to train them, that's an issue, and committee volunteers or special event volunteers. The other kind of volunteers are direct program. You probably as a development person will not deal with people delivering direct services. The staff will do that. So that's what we're talking about. Board education and interaction. That's a constant, isn't it? That's what we're taught to do, how to teach our boards to understand what they need to understand. How successful do you feel that is? How many think their boards really understand your job, what it takes to get it done, and have realistic expectations? Okie dokie. And you know what? Having dealt with a whole lot of boards, I totally agree with you. Okay, reports to the CEO. How many people have been in an office with your supervisor or CEO and hear, I know you made goal, but it's not enough, you have to go out. And your reward for doing so well is that we're going to increase your goals next year. So your reward is getting punished. Or we're short on the budget, we're going to throw it into the fundraising goals. How many have heard that? Uh-huh, okay. So it's an educational process, isn't it? You as a development person are outward focused. You are focused to your donors. You are focused on your volunteers. You are focused on your CEO, and you're focused on your board. No pressure there. And you feel absolutely overwhelmed, crushed. You feel like you can't get there. And you want to so badly, even when you make goal. You feel like, oh, there's so much more. And forget having a life. Even if you're working part-time, there are no part-time jobs, only part-time pay. It's part of this industry. It really is. Okay, but of this, where do you spend your time the most? Donors. Right, donors. You spend, I hope, 80% of your time assessing, analyzing, making appointments, and talking to donors. Pretty accurate? The rest of the time is waiting for airplanes? If you travel? Okay. I'm thinking of the foundation people because they do so much traveling for the university. We focus on our donors. That is where our energy and our attention are. Is there anyone who focuses on anything different? Right, you don't do programming. You don't set up the buffets or whatever you do. It just doesn't happen. Okay. I'm going to ask you, we're going to go through this list because when you look at your donors, these are things you think about. I want you to think about this list because we're going to use it later. To assess them or to approach them or to understand them. Social styles, you can use any or all of these. Social styles, personality styles, they can be the same, they can be different. Their style of giving. Their history of giving. Their style of giving might be big cash once in a while. It might be annual giving. Moderately, that would be, some people like to give in-kind gifts. You'd have to assess that. Their connections. Their values. This is without priority, this list, but probably the values is where you need to start. Their passions. What are their needs? What do they need to see from you? What's their family like? What is their personal community like? All of that helps you understand this donor. and build relationships. Because first, last, and always, success means building excellent long-term relationships. Okay, given that, we get results, we develop these relationships, we make good asks. That means we figure out the right amount to ask of the right person at the right time. And it works. And we get a check. One of the most frustrating CEOs I observed was one who felt that every call by their development person should result in a check in hand after that initial call of $1,000 or more. Two things pop up to me. Is number one, it's an unrealistic expectation. Number two is if they're going to jump up and give you a check for $1,000 at the first call, you haven't asked them for enough. Okay. And number three is you're going to make enemies because you have now offended the donor by not having enough of a relationship. So there's an educational opportunity there for that manager. Okay, and if you're doing your job right, you've planted the seeds. You have built these relationships. The seeds are planted, so the trees are going to grow, and we're going to enjoy the shade tomorrow with that donor. A long-term relationship. As long as we understand that building a long-term relationship doesn't mean making 3 visits in 3 weeks. It takes time to do it. But your supervisor may think, well, you've visited them 3 times, why don't we have $500,000? Okay. What happens? This is the phenomena I'm talking about, and we'll go through this. And it's the second one from the bottom. And I've talked to a lot of professionals about this. Why is it that the average life of a development professional in a job is 18 months? Why is that? What are we doing wrong? In the for-profit industry, anyone with a brain who has ever supervised anybody knows that it takes 2 to 3 years for an employee to earn their pay. You have to put in training and time. They have to have time and grade to understand the organization and all the players in it and the how everything works, and then they start producing at years 2 and 3. So at 18 months, an enormous number, high percentage of people in this industry move on to another job. Now, I wouldn't be so worried about it, except if they went back to the for-profit world or got a job somewhere else, but they go to the same job for a different organization. So they really care about philanthropy. They really love what they do. Why is this happening? Okay, and that's why this is about you as a development professional. So hopefully you can keep this in mind wherever you are and whatever you're doing in how you're going to operate. Your donors are responding, but your boards don't listen to you. We know that. It's a huge problem, and it's fairly universal. The CEO doesn't believe you, even when you've submitted all your reports and you've given them all your proof and everything is there and goals are all met. Your CEO is like, well, I don't know. And you go in and ask for software, and you ask for more support in the office. You ask for anything, and you get a bad reaction. Okay, after you're making your goals, and this started me, had to be 9 or 10 years ago, I started thinking about this because somebody who was the president of a foundation was terminated. And she had done an extraordinary job at that foundation in attaining goals and getting new donors and getting new programs and everything funded. And a new CEO took over, and she was gone. Shocked me. I could not figure it out. Shocked her. All right, so I started asking around. And if anybody been to the AFP conference, are you going anybody going to San Francisco? Cool. Look me up. I'll see you there. I started talking, anecdotally, we all talk about this a lot. Actually, I was on a phone call with Daryl 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about it again, this turnover thing. Why? Why is this happening? And having talked to some CEOs about it, this is what I got. And I thought it was going to be a really complicated reason or reasons that were all different. No, I did the why is this happening. Had to do with trust. One word, no confidence. Why didn't the CEO or the board or whoever trust the development officer, even when they're doing a great job? Part of it is sometimes they have a really, really bad history with somebody who came before that development officer, and they're transferring that on to that person. Unreasonable or unmet expectations. That is a huge list. Part of it is expecting that $1,000 gift on the first call. Part of it is expecting you to, generally speaking, let me back up a little, grants normally, if you're budgeting more than 17%, unless there's a reason for it because of your organization, if you're budgeting more than 17% as grant income, you're probably being way optimistic. That's about it. If you think you're going to write more grants and get 80% of your fundraising budget out of that, it isn't going to happen. And it really isn't going to happen now with the change in government and the reduction in funding. And then the development officer is blamed. Things over which they have absolutely no control. Unmet expectations. If there's a huge expectation of 20 calls a week, that's probably not physically doable in a very efficient professional way. Things like that. Now, this is not to say that this is a fault thing. What this is the CEOs that are talking like this and the boards that are acting like this are undereducated about what the reality is. And I don't know that I have a perfect one-word answer on how to get them educated or get them to listen, but it is something you have to focus on. Lack of effective communication. This is really important. Do you spend the time talking to your board or your supervisor, CEO, or your fundraising volunteers that you spend talking to your donors? Yes, no? No. There aren't enough hours in the day. But maybe that's the problem. And when you talk to each other, are you speaking the same language? Are you saying things in a way that each of you can understand? And lack of personal attention. This is one that got me. And I was shocked at how often I ran into it. The CEOs felt that their development people didn't pay enough attention to them. The board presidents felt that their development people didn't pay enough attention to them. And I have to be honest, I stood there with my mouth open. I'm like, are you nuts? But I can say that on the convention floor. I can't say that in a meeting. It's an opportunity for education here, I guess. Is that a politically correct way to say it? Okay, how do you fix it? And this was, I've talked to several people about this. If we treat our CEO, our board chair or exec committee, and our fundraising special event volunteers not at the same time level because there aren't enough hours in the day, but in the same way we treat donors, it might help. I don't know that that's a magic answer, but I've talked to a lot of people. That seems to be the consensus. So what I'm asking you to do is think about this, implement it, or try to implement it, and let me know how it works. Because I'm groping around here, but I think that this will work, and the paying attention to the CEO thing might get helped. I truly was shocked at that. I really was. Research, because it's internal. Anything except your donor is internal, so it feels to you like you shouldn't have to work that hard to communicate with them. They should believe you. They should trust you, and they should. They hired you. You filled the requisites for the job. You got interviewed. They love you. And then you get to this point and they go, I don't know. So after that, after you're hired, a good boss is a boss who always makes sure their staff has the resources and the training to do the best job they can. Bosses forget that. I guarantee you they forget that. Or they never knew it. A lot want to micromanage, a lot want to criticize, and in nonprofits, often the CEO is reluctant to fulfill their role in development, in building those relationships and fundraising, because there are a lot of donors that want to interact with what I call the I am, the executive director and the board president. And if they're only talking to the development person, that they may not be satisfied. And the board president may not want to talk to him. And your CEO may not want to talk to him. So once again, a lot of the responsibility of this is on them, but we're not talking about them today. We're talking about how can you make your life easier as a development person. Treat them like a donor. Research them as a human being. Get to know their kids' names. Adapt your approach, and we're going to talk about that in my second PowerPoint. Make sure you go talk to them. Go to your board chair. Go to their house. Talk to them. Let them get to know you as a human being. I know it takes time, and I'm sorry about that because it does take time. But I think if you invest that time, you are going to be happier down the line because people tend, when they're giving gifts, they will give a gift to somebody who asks them who they trust. It isn't any different with this board president. If they get to know you, they're going to trust you. And you're not just going to be a talking face at a board meeting. How many people spend the time, just let me ask, when you have a special event committee meeting? Oh my gosh, I gotta write an agenda, I better get on that. 15 minutes. Oh, good grief, tomorrow's the board meeting, I gotta do a report. And you stick it in half an hour here, half an hour there. Would you treat a donor like that? No, you'd put more time into it and more attention. Okay, so do that. Try to do that. It's a balancing act. It isn't perfect, and it isn't easy, but you can do it. And then follow up. After you meet with your CEO and you talk about his or her goals, his or her expectations, and get to know those kids' names too. And with your CEO, figure out a birthday. Don't forget it. It makes a difference. It's easy to terminate somebody you're not close to. It's really hard when they're a friend. Have any of you ever actually thought that through, doing that? Good for you. All right. Okay, and then follow up. Am I doing what you're expecting? If I'm not, help me understand what you're expecting and how I can satisfy that. Okay, here you go. I was just saying that. You can build the trust like you do with a donor. You're going to have to really, really, really schedule your time. Because if you're like me, if there's something I don't want to do, I will find the next shiny object and follow that, and find an excuse not to do it. So it takes some self-discipline, and it takes really, really, really adult awareness here. And I can't say that every board director or chair or every CEO I've run across is the adult in the room. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And you have to adapt to that and figure it out. And ask questions. Communicate, communicate, communicate. If you can't understand what they're saying to you, tell them that. I'm not understanding. Okay. If they trust you, you're going to, these are just really standard things. Universal respect. There's a lot of eye rolling sometimes in board meetings. Has anybody ever run into that? And be transparent. Don't try. If something doesn't work, if, I can't say that word. Okay. If you goof up, fess up. And own it. That will gain you more respect than anything. None of us are perfect. I am embarrassed by the mistakes I've made in my life. And the easiest way to deal with them is say, oops, I did this, I'm sorry, I'll fix it, and move on. Communicate, communicate, communicate. As with everything in the entire universe, every war, anything negative is a lack of communication. Do what you say you're going to do and do it on time. That's a quirky thing, because sometimes in this industry, things, well, more often than they should, don't happen when scheduled. Don't over-promise and under-deliver. Under-promise and over-deliver. And deliver measurable results. And Ellen is going to tell you how to measure those. All right, any questions so far? Okay, so you know you're going to go and treat your internal relationships like your donors. Right? The good thing about it is it's going to be easier to get their attention and make an appointment because you don't have to chase them. And email and mail and call and all that stuff. They're there, so you can get them. Okay. I have to check time here. Okay, good, it worked. I didn't know if we were going to have time to do this. I was exposed to a shorthand way of assessing people that you're talking to, that you want something from, that you need something from, whose attention you want to get. I think this was written in 1975, and the first time I ran across it was in 1977. Most of you in here weren't born yet. It's really scary. Okay. These are social styles. And the reason I'm using that is because it works for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody in here. You have to find a methodology that you carry in the back of your head that gives you the ability to quickly assess a situation so you don't make a mistake and cut your throat, figuratively speaking, with a donor or with your staff people. Use the same stuff with your staff people and your board that you would with a donor. And this is just a really, really, really quick assessment. Once you've established a relationship with a donor, a long-term relationship, this is out the window because you already know them and you're working over the years with them, and those are the long-term relationships. Not every donor is going to be more than an entry-level donor, but you want to satisfy their needs anyway. So you have to figure out what they need. There are lots of books written about this. I think the first big one that hit it was 7 Faces of Philanthropy. Remember that? Well, some of you might remember it. Some of you weren't born. But great book, a lot of good information. What they did miss were women and women giving styles in that. So keep that in mind, but get the book and read it. And this has been reissued too. And then the new thing, the first time I heard it was asking styles, which is oriented to the asker. Your personal asking style, the first time I heard that, Laura Fredericks presented it. She has a book half written, it isn't finished. Finish it, Laura. And then there are 2 books on asking styles. One is first edition written by Andrea Kilstedt and second edition written by Linda Lysakowski. And Linda's book will be on the stands in April. Okay. But this is Helen's Q&D, which is quick and dirty, way of making an assessment when you walk into a room, when you walk into somebody's office, when you walk into their living room, whatever that looks like. There are 4, under social styles, there's driver, amiable, expressive, and analytic. And on my next PowerPoint, that's what we're going to focus on. Because that's what works for me, and I can explain it fast in my time frame. The asking style might be go-getter, rainmaker, mission controller, kindred spirit. They're cute names. I don't own them yet, so I'm not comfortable with what she's trying to say yet. Is the person you're talking to methodical, intuitive, an introvert, or an extrovert, or a mix? Most of us are a mix of all these things. And the first thing you have to do is figure out who you are, what your personality or asking style is. And then you can figure out how to approach. Okay. So understand how you interact with your internal constituents, like you would with the donors, and create trust. That seems to be, and I don't have an easy answer to fix it, trust or lack of trust is the answer I have been getting on my totally non-scientific study. Any questions at this point? Oh, somebody has to have a question. An opinion? Shannon. Oh, yeah, turn it on.
Back to this issue about turnover, which of course is really a hard one for all of us. You put the onus on the development folks. I'm sorry, you put the real onus on the CEOs, or it's on, you're going back and forth on that.
It's a mix. It is not a one answer fits all. Part of it is some CEOs are terrific and they really get it. Some development people should find another place where they'll be happier to work. There's no argument about that. I'm talking just universally about the apparent turnover. It's an educational process. CEOs need to be really, really pragmatic, well-informed, and realistic about their expectations of their development people. Some are extraordinary. And so I didn't mean to sound critical of every CEO, I'm sorry. And some just don't want to be bothered. They hired a development director, don't bother me anymore, you go do it. Board volunteers can be the same way. We have a development person, why should I have to go make calls? Why should we be involved in fundraising? That's his or her job. But it really is an educational process that's why the nominating committee is the most important committee on your board, to make sure that the people you get on your board understand and are well informed and willing to participate. So it really, there's no easy light switch answer. It just isn't there. But what I'm trying to get to is the trust issue seems to be the crux of the issue. And you have to educate everybody. But development people, on the whole, tend to not maybe give enough time to developing the relationship with their internal constituents. Because it doesn't occur to them. It isn't our habit to do that. There's no evil intent. There's no negative anything. It simply is not the way we've done it, so we don't do it. Libby.
I fully concur with the notion of the development officer getting to know, the board members, the internal constituency. I'm hesitant in some cases, knowing that the CEO has not necessarily gotten to know the board members, and that the development person asking a board member out to lunch or doing a visit in their home would be perceived as a threat to the CEO.
You're right. You're absolutely correct. That can happen. And it's again, not a one-step process. You'd have to get into that situation, and maybe the development person could go talk to the CEO, or maybe not. It depends on the CEO's mindset and style, and suggest maybe they'd like to be involved. Would you please join us? This would be lovely, and maybe that'll work, and maybe that won't. But you have to take a step, and it isn't going to something. This is a pretty ingrained culture. It's going to take some to start getting it moving the way it should. Go ahead.
Okay, I've been on a fundraising committee for more years than I care to count. Our big problem is convincing people to serve on that committee. Our board really doesn't want to do it, so I know there's no magic bullets, but I welcome any suggestions you might have, as you have given us. But
You're right. There are no magic bullets. Manna does not fall from heaven. God will not provide. It's always, I can't tell you how often I've listened to, well, I don't know how it's going to come in, but I know it will because it always does. And that's the proof that the money's going to come in. On your board, you need to get with your nominating committee, and you need to develop a really clear, warm, engaging invitation to new board members, clearly outlining the expectations in financial support of the organization, their personal support, and bringing in other support. Again, part of that is the education of helping them understand it's building relationships. It isn't going and asking a stranger for money. There's a technical term when you go to a major donor who has given a lot of major gifts in the community, and you haven't built a relationship and you want a big gift. Doing that, the technical term for that is rude. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Go ahead, Ellen.
Can I add to that answer?
Sure.
I'm in the questioner's place, but I'm going to be an answerer. I think a lot of board members and a lot of people you'd like to recruit as volunteers have a misconception that the way you raise money is you go to somebody and you say, hello, give me your wallet. Right? Nice to meet you. How much money are you giving me today? Because they're fearful. And I think a tremendous way to solve the problem is to teach people how to ask questions that establish rapport and let the actual acquisition of the gift evolve. So a great way to start a conversation is, nice to meet you, tell me about yourself. Nobody's afraid to ask those questions.
Right, and that's the educational process, is getting people to understand it isn't about asking for money, which is why board members get freaked out, and they do. All of them do. It's about making a friend, building that relationship. And as my friend Mary Reddick said yesterday, if you've built the relationship, there is no ask. They just give it.
Just one?
So one of my best friends at our foundation, Dave Dirks, he's been doing it for like 40 some years. And I was on the road this week in Michigan, and we get this email every day of all the current events, and there's this Dirks Leads Parade. And so our former president, Sandy Boyd, who's now 90, Dave and Sandy and his wife are very generous to the university. He thought it'd be a great idea for his 90th birthday to have the marching band of the university come to his house and play the fight song. Nothing to do with fundraising, all to do about developing the relationship. So that's the comment your colleague made, I think, that's so important. It's about developing the relationship. It's really not about raising money. It's weird to say that, but wherever Mary is, I completely agree. My experience has been the asking part's kind of crazily the easy part. It's developing a relationship is the challenging part. And I have a question for you, and I've been doing this for a long time. My worry for me, and even at our university foundation, I see a lot of people that come into the business in their 20s, and for whatever reason they leave. I mean, even at a high-level university foundation, I see a lot of people a couple of years in, and then, oh, they're gone. So I'm interested in your opinion, but I'm also interested in the younger people, the people who are in the field. If any of you have, what is it we're doing that we need, what do we need to be doing that we're not doing? Because I'm worried about turnover. Yeah, I'm lucky that I've been at one place a long time, and the longer you're in it, I think a lot of people would agree, the better it gets.
True, and my observation is the longevity still is in hospital foundations and university and college foundations. That's where the people that have been there a long time. Hold on.
Oh, I was going to answer this question about millennials leaving. I resemble that remark, and I did fundraising for Texas Tech University. Now I'm fundraising for Horizons, this nonprofit in Cedar Rapids. The reason we leave is really the job hopping is more easy to progress in your career than staying in the same position and getting a promotion from like development officer to executive development officer, or however your actual hierarchy works. It's easier to get 2 years experience here and then apply somewhere else, and you'll have 6 job offers with a higher job title and more experience and growth. Hope that helps.
Okay.
I'll add something else is that I feel like there may be a lack of training, like with generational differences when donors are of an older age and you're young and you're a development officer, and you might not always know how to communicate or connect and build relationships with somebody who's 40 or 50 years older than you. You know, like what those interests are, and getting them to trust you with their gift when they have been used to working with someone who's been with the organization for a long time. So,
And that's where Tell Me About Yourself comes in. Tell me everything. Tell me what is important to you. Tell me lots of open-ended stuff. Heaven knows, I've been called on by a fair amount of development officers in my life, and they have varied from middle 20s to 60s. And truly, for me, I don't see their age. I see who they are as a person. And your donor will see you as a person after the first 10 minutes, if you're asking the right questions and you're really genuinely interested in the answers. And they can teach you history, they can give you an insight into the world that you may never have been aware of, and value that. That's part of the beauty of getting to know people.
Well, I'm back about job hopping because we have hired young people to be our executive director. They stay a year or two and then they leave. One example was a young man, and you have to realize any organization is spending money to educate these people.
Right.
And he was there for 9 months and then left because he had applied for a graduate program out of state. Well, there was a lack of honesty there. I mean, he should have told us that.
That is correct. You have
Right.
spent money.
We
you've
had
wasted
spent money to educate
Yep.
him, and 6 months later, he's gone.
Yep. Yes, you're right. No argument.
I'm surprised that no one has mentioned the word salary here. I figured I'd get a little round of applause. And having been an executive director myself for 2 big organizations, I can say that it really makes no sense to be cheap. To think, okay, you know, I could afford to give them a $3,000 raise or a $5,000 raise, but I bet they'll go for $1,000. And I see this over and over, and I think it's just shortchanging your organization if you don't pay people what they're worth.
Right. And that is the culture of, because it's a nonprofit, everything should be cheap, or, excuse me, affordable. And it's a bad culture, and we do need to change it as an industry. We do need to change it.
Okay, so I have kind of a comment question about asks. My fundraising commitment is to a volunteer program. My real job is as a professional organizer. So I have built really solid relationships with people over 10, 15 years that I've been doing this. I know their parents' names, their kids' names. I know where they went to school. I know, exactly what you're saying. Like, I'm older than a millennial, so I kind of understand sitting at the table and building those relationships, and I've spent a really long time doing that. So I feel super comfortable with a lot of wealthy people that I organize for. But then when it comes to me asking for money for my Courage Ride, I feel like a blubbering idiot because, I care about this because my mom died of sarcoma. I care about this because it raises money for sarcoma cancer patients in our community. But if that's not something that they have like a personal connection to, like them loving me and loving what I do for them isn't enough for them to just
That's
give me
right.
a big fat check. And
That is
so-
correct. That's where you have to connect with their values.
So I need a better spiel?
Oh,
or,
no.
Like,
You need to ask them what they're interested in,
and they
what their
already
passions are.
Right, and they're already giving money to, the foundation or to hospice of, how do you work your way into someone's heart that's already giving money to so many things
Let
that
me
are
tell
already
you my
dear?
personal story, and let me let you know what I'm doing with the rest of my life. And don't ask them for money. Just tell them your story and see how they react to it. Not every donor is your donor. Just because they have money, just because they've given money, doesn't make them yours. You have to build that relationship. And the only way you're going to do that is if they care about what you do. If they're all about arts and stuff like that, they're probably not going to give to human services. If they're all about helping disabled kids, they may not give to air flights or something. It just depends. You need to get to know them. And the only way you do that is talk to them. Astounding system. Okay, I have to get. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize all over the place.
Yes, you do.
You have to, because we're recording. Okay, I'm older than you and I can turn it on. It's okay.
You are a woman. Okay, first of all, thanks for your comments this morning. You can decide what kind of personality I am because I went to the different microphone. Regarding the slide on assessing styles, your own and donor styles.
Right, we're going to go into that in my next PowerPoint.
Okay, well then I'll wait.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I am a university teacher here at the university. Been teaching here for 40 years, and I specialize in disruption. Okay, so here is a disruptive question. How would a society where we don't need any donors, how would it look?
How would a society, if we didn't need any donors?
Right.
How would you suggest that these charitable purposes be supported?
The same question, How would a society look where there is no need for charity?
Brilliant.
Equal society. A society where there is no rich and poor, everybody is equal. Equality Trust. There is a website created in England. Please, those of you who have not looked at it, take a look at this website called equalitytrustuk.org, where they are striving for a society where everybody is equal. And is it a dream or is it a possibility? That is what. So if a society has no charity, that doesn't mean they're a bad society. That means they don't need any charity. Everybody has opportunity as well-being and are doing good. So we don't have to depend on billionaires. All of us are billionaires at the heart.
That would be perfect. In a perfect world.
Right.
We've never heard that.
There are countries like that, and they don't have doors in their homes. So look for those countries. And many of them are Scandinavian countries.
Interestingly enough, talking about the most, not the highest giving level, but one of the most charitable countries when it comes to helping people. This was in 2016. The most helpful country, you're going to love this, in helping strangers was Iraq. So you can never tell, folks. And of the top 20, the top 10, only one was a Western country, the USA. The rest were all Middle Eastern and African countries.
So don't take me wrong.
Right. So you're right.
I enormously believe USA is a very charitable country. People here are generous beyond belief. You know, that is not the question. I'm just asking what if questions. So I totally admire the capacity.
I don't know that we can answer it here today, but it can be a goal. Wouldn't the goal of a community health free clinic in Cedar Rapids, their goal is to never be needed again? They're not there yet.
Yeah. So anyway, I just
it's a great
throw
thought.
Something for the mind to be.
It's a great
thinking
thought.
About.
Okay, I have about 10 minutes left here, so we can give you a break. This is, like I said, my quick and dirty personality style. I'm going to go through it quickly, but I gave it to you in exhaustive writing, so you can go home and read it and think about it. These made so much sense to me. Driver, expressive, amiable, analytic. Basic personality styles. A driver, that's the person who comes through the office in the morning and is so focused on where they're headed, they don't say good morning to anybody. And they just go, and they don't know they're being rude. They just do it. This is a person who tells you, yeah, I'll give you 10 minutes. Believe them, they mean it. That's, because of our personality styles, we think people don't really mean what they say. Please believe them, they do. It's a simple thing. And I don't need to read this to you, but you can read it. This is a person who might have heavier, darker furniture in their office, might have antiques in their house. Oh, it can be a woman or a man. Their personality is sort of just get to the point. And when they want that, get to the point. Amiable. This is a lovely, gentle style. They want everybody to be happy. In a positive way, they'll make you incredibly comfortable. They will talk to you. They will try to get to know you as much as you try to get to know them. On the negative side, they will tell you anything you want to hear, so there's no stress. They can't stand stress. I'm talking about really pure people, pure styles. And we're all a mix. An amiable will tell you, absolutely, I'll be absolutely happy to give a gift. Let me just think about it a little. That's a no, folks, out of an amiable. They just don't want you to be upset when you leave. They don't care if you're upset later. They just don't want you, they don't want to see it. Okay. Expressive. Okay, these are the people in their offices or in their homes. Boatloads of pictures of their family and their friends and things they've done. These are the big communicators on Facebook. You can do a lot of research on Facebook and find out what people's styles are. They'll talk and talk and talk. They won't talk about what you want to talk about. So know that this is a 2-hour call because it'll take you that long to get them to open up about it's important to them. They'll talk about activities and people and things before they'll talk about what's in their heart. So be a little careful. More is not better, unnecessarily. So when you're talking to an expressive, they'll hug you, they'll kiss you, but they won't talk about something that's bothering them. They'll talk about the ski trip they took. So you just need to talk to them long enough to get them to open up. And they will promise you a check next Tuesday. They'll mean it when they say it. But you better call them next Tuesday and say, it's Tuesday, would it be okay if I came by to pick that up? Oh, I forgot. Okay. An analytic. This is somebody who's probably a number cruncher, accountant, Kent. No. He's a recovering finance person. An analytic is going to be the hardest nut to crack when you're talking about what's important to them emotionally, because they're not going to share. But you'll be able to figure it out by their giving habits. And if you walk into an office and the desk is clean and it's done mostly in white, and there's one lonely plant somewhere that his assistant or her assistant waters, that's an analytic. So if you were planning on talking about all the pretty pictures you brought to tell them about your program, stop, regroup, and take out the numbers. Show them the effect this has, what it costs, the return on the investment, the difference it's making in the lives of these people, and put a bottom line to it. They love numbers. It's a comfort zone for them. And you can attach the emotion to the numbers. But if they see numbers, they'll feel more secure. Now, this is the world's fastest going through this that you've ever seen. But if you think about it, go back and look at it, read it, get the book if you want, which is more complicated. And just to make you really crazy, this is the picture form of it. And then each of them breaks down into subgroups. So you have a driver. Everybody has what's called the default personality. If you are threatened, where do you fit in this spectrum? So take a guess. Where do I fit in this spectrum? Driver, expressive driver. Would I be a driver expressive? You like how they just change it around. And it tells you what the primary and secondary is. What would you guess if somebody threatened me? Expressive. Absolutely driver. The most obnoxious personality on there. And I've had to learn to adapt to really amiables and analytics, although I love numbers too, love numbers. So I'm okay, but amiables and expressives I'm okay with because I'm pretty expressive most of the time, but amiables took me time because I can be too energetic for an amiable, and you can actually see them back up. Then you know, oh, stop emoting. Okay, these are, and they're in your PowerPoint copies. These are the resources that you can go to. And there's a color one that never made any sense to me because I'm one of those people that the days of the week are colors. That's how I learned them as a kid. So the color about personalities didn't make any sense because the colors didn't fit. So I could never do that. It made me skitsy. So I never learned it. But you find the methodology that works for you that allows you, this is just, I don't mean to call it a parlor trick, but it's a fast assessment tool that I have used virtually every day of my life since I learned it. Find the tool that works for you, and it'll help you get in the door. And if you get in and you think you're calling on an expressive person and that person ends up being an amiable, you can adjust, because you have to be aware of who they are, but you have to be aware of who you are too. I know I'm a driver, so with amiables I have to be quiet and calm and serene and gentle, and I can go scream later. Okay, any questions about this? I just wanted to throw this in, and I wanted to time it so you could take that with you. All right, your question, sir, over there. There you are.
Regarding the styles, at what age can you start to determine what someone is? Can you make this assessment on a 16-year-old, 26-year-old, 46-year-old, 66-year-old, or at what age is this best determined?
Okay. In my dim, dark past, I was a den leader for 9 Cub Scouts, starting in 1st grade. And all 9 of them, by the way, got their arrow of light, and most of them became Eagle Scouts. Having said that, I used it then.
So good correlation, okay, age-wise. If that be the case, something that is circa 1975, I would contend that generations of today, we'll call them millennials. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but we'll just use that. I'm not so sure that millennials of today are the same as millennials in 1975 in terms of their styles. Would you care to comment on that?
I would have to, with care and gentleness, disagree. My son is 30. His circle of friends is huge. Looks like the United Nations, always has all his life. And you can, it honest to goodness still works. And this has been reissued. This handbook was reissued in 2014 with all this information, because it really is, millennials, although they tell me they don't like to be called millennials, really, this group of millennials is really involved. They're very passionate about what they're doing. But I still see the same personality styles. People that are shy and amiable, I just have to disagree, even because they traipse through my house all the time. I'm looking at them. I could have put a label or a mixed label on all of them. Go ahead.
You need a microphone. I would just say that people don't really change. We're not complicated creatures, but our environment is. The environment that young people today live in is unrecognizable from the environment that, you know, someone in the 70s grew up in. And I think that that is one of our biggest challenge when we're trying to relate to these intergenerational relationships. What is important to me now looks nothing like what was important to someone my age in the 70s. And so it's just try to, you know, do a thought experiment, use your imagination. You know, if I had all of these resources available to me when I was 20, what would my life have been like? It probably wouldn't have been anything like what you had. So I think that is probably the best way to think about it. You know, you're still the same person, but you would have made vastly different choices.
Very astute. I totally agree. Remember, in my lifetime, well, maybe you don't know, in my lifetime, TV was invented. PCs, not until I was an adult. Cell phones, not until I was an adult. She's talking about growing up in the 70s. I grew up in the 50s. Scary, guys. It has changed so much. But people don't change. They are who they are. The amount of information that our young people have to process in this day and age is overwhelming and so accessible, so much more information, so more immediately accessible. What are we dumping on our kids that they have to learn and assimilate and digest and use? It's huge. We could barely manage our own lives, and we're expecting them to do this. And by the way, just as an aside, they let out a study recently, millennials. Does anybody here do direct mail? Okay. Millennials are the fastest growing donor base for direct mail. Do you know why? Because they don't get mail. So they open it. Okay, it's 11:30. That's the scheduled lunch. Any other questions? Thank you all so much. Go forth.